Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Harrisburg City Council Chambers. Tonight, we have a public hearing. My name is Wanda R.D. Williams, and I'm the chair, and all city council are members. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. I now will call this meeting to order at 5:25. Mr. Petrosky, please do the roll call.
Mr. Allett,
Present.
Ms. Bowers,
Present.
Ms. Daniels,
Here.
Ms. Green, Mr. Madsen,
Here.
Mr. Majors, Ms. Williams.
Present, thank you. I'll now turn the public hearing over to Tiffany, our solicitor.
Good evening. Thank you, President Williams. We're here, public hearing to consider two bills that concern street vacations and a bill that concerns a change in traffic flow of a street in the city of Harrisburg. The first bill, Bill 1 of 2020, relates to a street vacation associated with the federal courthouse, and I will turn that over to Wayne and Jeff.
So the bill number one before you, as Tiffany noted, is related to the street vacations that are necessary to kind of formally consolidate the lot on which the federal courthouse is being constructed and ensure there are no property lines or rights of way that cause kind of administrative issues going forward. It's pretty straightforward as far as the issues that are being considered here, and I think the city engineer Wayne has reviewed the documentation. He's and this was during our planning commission and city council review of the federal courthouse project itself, and basically confirmed that the vacation of the streets will not result in traffic congestion or backups or adverse impacts to the surrounding community.
Is there anything else additional?
No, I think all of these were being approved without any other conditions. So, as noted, it's a fairly straightforward process and fairly administrative at this point because there's a big building sitting across most of these rights of way.
Tiffany, I would ask that as we do each bill, there are residents who are in the audience who would like to speak on behalf of each of those bills.
Absolutely.
So after council has an opportunity to ask the necessary questions, we will turn it over to the residents to speak about Bill 1, Bill 2, and Bill 3.
Good.
Okay. Ms. Daniels, do you have any questions on Bill 1, 2020?
No.
You do? Okay. Mr. Majors? No. Mr. Allett?
I do not.
Mr. Madsen?
None for me, thanks.
Ms. Bowers?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to Bill 2, 2020. Wait a minute, before I do that, is there anyone in the audience that's had questions about Bill 1, 2020? Okay, sir, please come to the mic and identify yourself.
My name is Philip Dobson. My question is, are there any streets to the north of Harris Street that are being vacated in this bill?
Not as a part of this bill, no. The footprint of the federal courthouse site is located between Harris and Riley Streets and 6th and 7th Streets.
Thank you.
Is that all, sir? Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Please note, Mr. Petrosky, that Councilwoman Green is here, as well as Councilman Majors are in attendance. Okay, here are no other questions. I'll give Ms. Green a minute to sit down for a minute. Ms. Green, we're going over Bill 1, 2020. There was no questions by any of the other council members. You might just want to take a quick minute to look it over and see if you have any questions to address that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As of right now, I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Bill 1, 2020, I'm recommending for vote at the legislative session immediately following the hearing. Moving on to Bill 2, please, 2020.
Bill 2 of 2020 is a bill to consider changing the traffic flow on Hamilton Street and Harris Street from one-way to two-way, and this is part of the State Archives project.
Okay, Mr. Knight?
I'll let Mr. Martin.
Okay, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Council, President, members of the City Council. Wayne Martins, City Engineer. So this was a proposal that was set forth in the traffic impact study done by the State Archives. Some of the components that I'll talk about actually involve the courthouse site as well. As you know, they sit complementary, contiguous sites. The first one is Hamilton Street two-way. Currently, it's not wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic and parking, obviously, two-way parking. So if you look at the proposed signing and marking plan, there will be one side of the street, so the south side of Hamilton would be would prohibit parking. Pickup and drop-off parking would be proposed on the north side or the westbound side of Hamilton between 6th and Wallace for that Hamilton school site. You know, the school is closed, is still utilized. And then a residential parking, residential, maybe even permit parking would be proposed on the north side of Hamilton between Wallace and North 7th Street for residents that live there. Vehicles would, it would flow like a yield flow street, like a lot of our streets, which is consistent with the volumes that we see. So if you have multiple vehicles coming, one would have to pull over. It's called a yield flow street. A lot of our streets are like that. For Harris Street, the federal courthouse will be widening Harris Street between Wallace and 7th. That would occur along the south side of Harris, along the federal courthouse site. Between North 6th and Wallace, parking would be prohibited on both sides to provide the two-way operation. There's the applicants, the State Archives is proposing 7 on-street parking stalls on Wallace Street, if you recall, as part of their land development plan to accommodate residents in there.
There's already sideways parking adjacent to the State Building, so where are you, I'm looking at Harris Street, so where are there going to be additional parking?
It would be on Wallace Street. So you have like this, you visualize the State Archives. To the south of the archive site is the parking lot, and then there's on-street, sort of a bulb out along Wallace Street.
So will that entail going from Harris Street to Hamilton Street, where they will do the widening of Wallace Street?
No, Wallace, I'm sorry, can you ask the question again? Wallace Street will not go through to Hamilton. There'll be a building in the way.
Okay. What about the 3 homes that are still sitting in that area? How does that impact them?
On Hamilton or Harris?
On Wallace Street?
I mean, those 7 spaces are for public
But
residential use.
how would the building and the widening of that Wallace Street impact those 3 homes that sit there presently? There's still 3 homes that are there. So what impact would that have for those neighbors?
I don't anticipate any impact. No physical modifications to their land will have to occur.
I do believe that they would need to approach the street from 7th Street because they'd be going westbound on Clinton
Sure.
then, and
They
then
would-
come
they would have to
southbound
come,
on Wallace
right.
to access those parallel parking spots across the street from where their homes are located. Otherwise, I don't believe there'd be any other impact on those.
So are they going to be given those, an opportunity to park in those adjacent parallel parking spots? Are they designated spaces for those neighbors? Because if they're not, where are they going to park at?
Yeah. I don't know that they're designated. Of course, the existing on-street parking is not designated either for them. The State Archives does have an accessory parking lot of their own for visitors. So they have 2 parking lots, one under the building for staff that work on site, and then they'll have a surface lot basically right next to where these on-street stalls are for any visitors that come.
But you'll have parallel parking, you widen Wallace Street, you inconvenience 3 neighbors that live still presently in that vicinity. So you're telling me on-street parking? How would they have on-street parking when people who are coming to visit the Archives building will dominate that area?
Well,
Especially when you're widening the street.
Harris Street's also being widened.
Well, I'm not in agreement with Hamilton Street, with Harris Street I am, but not with Hamilton Street, because you still have the school that has the buses that comes from the 7th Street corridor up Hamilton Street. I can't see, there's no need for us to do 2 ways. That would be so chaotic.
But those buses would be accommodated with the proposed loading zones on the proposed plan.
Are you widening Hamilton Street?
Hamilton Street would not be widened, no.
Well, then how are you going to accommodate them? How are you going to accommodate the transportation buses that unload the children on that particular side street? And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's still 2 homes that sit on the Hamilton side. Okay, on the north side.
So, yeah, so Hamilton Street is a 25-foot wide street.
So will there be parking on the one side? You indicated
There
there.
will be residential parking between Wallace and 7th, loading zone between Wallace and 6th on the north side of the street.
You can't do 2 ways there. That's gonna be-
That's probably
Especially if
why,
you're not
I
gonna
mean,
widen.
this is a street that sees 30 vehicles a day. Most of our streets are, I mean, we have Berry Hill Street that's only 30 feet wide, you know? And that has parking on both sides and 2 lanes of traffic. And we get 9,000 vehicles a day. So, you know, this is,
So you did your traffic study?
the State Archives prepared the traffic study with the land development plan.
How long did they do the traffic study?
How long ago? It was 1 year ago. This traffic study I'm looking at right now was
How long
submitted-
was the study? 1 week, 2 weeks? Lived here all my life. I know how.
But with when the volumes were counted? So, excuse me, I only printed out the
Okay, you can get
report
that.
itself. I didn't print out the appendix, but I certainly have all the appendix. And you have,
Okay,
the projections are on here for 2040.
you can get that information to me. I don't want to stall the hearing. Are you finished with your presentation?
I am.
Okay. I'm going to now open it up to council members. Ms. Bowers, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Green?
No questions for me, thank you.
Mr. Mattson?
No questions for me, thanks.
Mr. Allen?
I don't know that I have any questions. I've tried to follow kind of exactly all the various changes that are going to be made. But if you could walk me through the kind of the workflow? Because I know right now, sorry, I have the map up too. So Hamilton Street runs one way, west to east right now, correct?
Correct. Correct. Both
And Harris Street also runs west to east currently.
west east.
Okay, so
No, Hamilton runs east to west.
East to west.
Harris runs west to east currently.
no, are you sure? Hamilton runs west to, oh, east to west, you're right, sorry. You're right. So they're the opposite of each other right now?
That's correct.
Okay. And so from a traffic workflow situation, they want vehicles to be able to enter Hamilton and Harris from both 6th and 7th Street to get to parking that's going to be abutted off of Wallace Street. Is that summarizing correctly?
So that would be the goal of the State Archives facility. Keep in mind that the federal courthouse land development plan has Harris Street going two ways between Wallace and 7th to access the federal courthouse parking facility.
All right, I'll hold off right now. I'm mostly curious because I drive that area every day. And I understand right now it's not a high-traffic section of the city, but with two major projects going in, I realize that the whole 6th, 7th Street corridor is really going to increase in traffic, particularly in the side street. And while there's not a lot of residents that live between 6th and 7th Street, there's a whole lot do that live west of 6th Street into kind of the heart of Midtown. So that's something I'm just want to be kind of cognizant of that impact. And the one conversation we haven't fully had with all of this is how we're going to continue to try to address parking kind of within the city too. So I feel like these are kind of tangential conversations that we have to have. So that's the only thing that kind of gives me pause in terms of saying, let's make sure that we have some multiple solutions that we're thinking beyond just simply these street vacations. But I'll stop for now.
Mr. Majors.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I think Councilmember Allard, one of my concerns brought up one of my concerns, especially Harris Street. So, again, Harris Street, and I apologize if I miss it, Harris Street is being widened and then converted to two-way, or it's going to stay the same width?
So Harris Street between North 7th and Wallace will be widened by the federal courthouse. It's going to be widened to the federal courthouse site.
Okay, so it'll be
south.
widened south.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct. The curb line will be moved.
okay. But yeah, and again, a traffic study is great based upon the current volume, but we know with both of those buildings, volume is going to be increased. So, what do the plans anticipate that increase in volume, or are they all just based on the current volume?
So the plans do show a 2040 growth rate with the courthouse. I mean, it was all the traffic studies done for the Hudson property up on North 7th Street, the city North 7th Division Street corridors, the federal archives and the the federal courthouse and state archives were all done together, or done by the same firm using the same data. So it was modeled and simulated using SYNCRO.
Okay.
Anticipated growth was factored in, as well as the proposed developments.
Okay, and the traffic studies say that growth, based upon those studies, the growth is, the streets can handle the growth that's going to be anticipated on those.
Correct. I mean, like I said, they would function as a yield flow street. Hamilton would function as a yield flow street between 6th and 7th, and the volumes are low enough that a yield flow street is appropriate. And then Harris would function as a yield flow street between 6th Street and Harris Street. I'm sorry, between Sixth Street and Wallace Street, between Wallace and Seventh, it would be widened.
Okay, so, and again, and then Harris is going from west to east, right?
Presently? it goes
Presently?
from west to east.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
and that would become a two-way. So in terms of the traffic in the mornings when folks are coming in and out of those buildings, you know, what does that traffic flow look like? I mean, to me, I think that's gonna, if it's a yield flow on 6, you could potentially have some issues with folks trying to, you know, move up and down Harris Street.
So the State Archives traffic impact study has so little traffic. I think you're probably mostly talking about the
Yeah.
state, or the
Yeah,
federal
the federal courthouse, right.
courthouse facility. Because the State Archives, I think it serves traffic throughout the day as people,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
want to wish to
Yeah,
visit.
State Archives is one thing, that's getting
Right.
folks into the building to go to work. You know, maybe a few folks that want to visit the archives, do research, and then out. But both of those, you know, abutting either one, you could have some potential flow issues with folks coming into the federal courthouse, which is probably going to be a more active building than the State Archives.
Right. So the federal courthouse would see a lot of AM and PM peak traffic flows to the parking lot that's dedicated to the judges. That parking lot would be accessed from Harris, and they would, you know, the best direction, the percentages are showing them coming from 7th Street. Somewhere I have a percentage. So, looks like they're anticipating about 20% coming from 6th Street onto Harris. The remaining amounts would come off of 7th Street.
Okay. Like I said, I still share some of the concerns, and as well as for those residents that are still occupying those properties right along between Harris and Clinton Street. But I'll pass on to my fellow colleague. Thank you.
I mean, one of the recommendations in these studies, although it hasn't been discussed at great length, was offering driveways to those residential properties. I think the properties between the structures are owned by Redevelopment Authority.
Okay, so between those two homes, that track is owned by the Redevelopment Authority and potential, okay.
I believe so. The track on Harris Street.
The track on Harris, okay.
Excuse me, there's 3 homes that sit down at the North 7th Street corridor. So where does the redevelopment, what do they own? Is there a lot there before
Yeah,
that?
I have to go back. They own quite a few parcels in and around the
Yeah, there's
site.
there's a parcel that is between the two homes.
I'm not sure about, well, I'd have to go back.
Okay.
I know they own the one on 7th, where the new sidewalk was installed,
Okay, on 7th and Harris,
7th and Harris.
okay, okay, all right.
Ms. Daniels?
And just again, on Harris, the widening just happens between Wallace and 7th, right?
Correct.
And I don't have other questions. Could you share the map and the study with us so that we could look at it? Because I just have the resolution.
Absolutely.
Is that it, Ms. Daniels? You done? Okay. Wayne, what about the residents on the Harris Street North corridor of the 7th Street corridor? What about those residents? You said they're going to widen that street from Wallace to 7th.
Hamilton would not be
But
widened.
Harris. I have 2.
I'm sorry,
I have 2
Harris.
homes that sit at the corner of North 7th Street, and they're widening that street? And they're going to have,
To the south, on the federal courthouse side of the.
yes, and they're going to have parking on both sides?
Well, the one site would be access for the courthouse. I don't know that there'd be parking there. I think for the turning radius, you wouldn't be allowed to park. You'd block the driveway if you parked up against the driveway. So I think the parking would be on the north side, adjacent to the residents.
You have 900 more employees coming in for the federal government. You already have a state office building that sits there that houses about 200 employees. And you're going to have the archives building, how many employees is that going to house?
I don't know.
So,
It's like 20. It's not, the archives are huge.
okay. Well, is this time sensitive?
The vacations certainly are. I think this is, they
So
had,
when do you
they
have
had
to-
an original date of 2021 to open this building. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But
When do you need to have this approved?
I can get you that date. I haven't
Okay.
spoken with the applicant recently.
Okay.
This was submitted
I know this.
February of 2019 as part of the land development plan package.
Well, I'm not ready to put it on the agenda for a vote yet. I think we'll wait. Any additional questions, council members? Could you get that information for me that I requested?
You want the traffic study?
Yes,
And you
yes.
want,
Yes, how it will impact. And I probably need, did they ever go up to talk to the neighbors in that vicinity?
I don't know. I can ask. Did have public meetings for the archives.
Let me know what the outcome of that. And then at the next legislative session, I'll consider putting that on if it's not time sensitive. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of Bill 2? Come to the mic, please.
My name is Philip Dobson. I own all of the houses on Harris Street between 6th and 7th. There are 4 houses there, which basically cater to low-income families. I have a few questions and a few statements, but a question is, how many parking spaces will there be between Wallace and 7th on Harris Street? Between Wallace and 7th Street along Harris Street, where you're widening the street.
It would be the same. The existing parking would remain on the north side of the street. There would be no removal of any parking spaces on the north side of that street. Does that help?
I find that difficult to believe if it's going to be two-way.
But this street is being widened, sir.
So it's going to have a zigzag in it? Because you would have to zigzag around the parking. That would, if you're going to allow parking to remain, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that.
This is the proposal. This is what's shown in the land development plans for the.
Because the street would have to make a hard turn to be able to avoid the parking. If you're going to make it, if the street is not wide enough for two-way, if you make it two-way and you have a turning lane into the courthouse, there's not going to be any accommodation for parking on Harris Street.
Well,
Wayne, do you have?
Wayne,
Do you have a, excuse me, Mr. Majors, do you have a question? I mean, do you have an answer to that?
I think I stated that all the parking on the north side of Harris Street is to remain residential parking. That's what's in the study. That's what's shown on the plans. I understand there's, maybe a little offset of a couple feet in the street that, show me a street in Harrisburg that doesn't have an offset in it at an intersection, right? I mean, not every one of our streets line up perfectly.
Also, on Hamilton Street, I also own a house on Hamilton Street, and I own houses on Wallace Street as well. Seven spaces is not enough parking for all the homes that are on those streets. I mean, I own 3 houses on Wallace Street in that block, and I have neighbors. I also have a house on Hamilton Street and 4 houses on Harris Street. So I don't understand where all this parking is going, how we're going to accommodate these people. Have there been any studies on the adverse effects on the people living in those neighborhoods?
I'm not the applicant here. I reviewed the plans that were submitted by the state and federal governments. They've done tons of community outreach on this project. I'm certain that Mr. Dobson has spoken to them, or
I have not
they've
spoken to them, and they have not
Mr.
reached
Dobson.
out to me.
Okay, we don't want to get into I'm sorry, we don't want to get
There-
into a verbal debate here.
There is no parking on walls.
Okay.
No.
Mr. Dobson, is there other, and you said you had other additional questions, sir?
Well, I do when we get to the next one, but I just wanted to go on the record as opposing this two-way street. I believe there are going to be adverse impacts on low-income families in these neighborhoods, and I don't believe that anybody has really reached out or done anything to address that concern. The main concern was accommodating the courthouse and the archives, and the houses were there first. And I believe that we really need to look at that in more depth and the adverse impacts on those families before we move forward. Thank you.
Mr. Majors? I thought you had.
I think, as Wayne pointed out, when you look at the map, if they're widening it, how wide are they going to make it on the south side of Harris Street? So you said currently it's 25 feet.
25 feet.
What's the proposed widening to?
I'll have to look at the land development plans for the federal courthouse to get that exact dimension.
Okay, and then if you could provide us with some information regarding the owners of the parcels of land on the north side of Harris Street that currently do not have proper homes on them. As Mr. Dobson pointed out, there are, I guess, 2 buildings, but they have there's 4 homes, so there's, yeah, 4 units total, right. So if you could provide us with that information.
You want all the property owners along that?
Between Wallace and 7th Street on Harris Street.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions, council members? Okay, thank you, Wayne. I understand that you're not the individual responsible for this particular bill, but you are the person that we need to speak with concerning Bill 2. Could you get that information to us and let me know what the time, if this Bill 2 is time sensitive? And be assured, Mr. Dobson, that we will not vote on anything that, we're not comfortable with. We certainly don't want to impact anyone's home. Moving on to Bill 3, 2020.
Bill 3 is a petition submitted by Buonarotti Trust and AutoZone for street vacation of a portion of Mini Alley and a portion of Mulkey Alley in connection with the AutoZone project. I will note that Attorney Dave Schutte here, he represents AutoZone. I don't know if Jeff or Wayne wants to give a little synopsis.
Yeah, so I can provide some background to the project and the proposal before you. So Mulkey Alley runs along the western side of the block, which the AutoZone, which was approved recently again last year, is going to be proposed to be constructed. So the Mulkey Alley right-of-way needs to be vacated to allow them to effectuate the land development plan that was proposed. They'll be using the essentially the entrance onto Mulkey Alley from Maclay as their driveway onto the site. And as part of that street vacation, what would happen is that Mini Alley, which runs east to west from about the middle of Mulkey Alley westward, would then end up becoming a dead-end street, which the city cannot have on their record. You can't have a dead-end right-of-way. So that required that small little stretch of Mini Alley also be vacated to the adjacent property owners. So this bill before you, again, is a necessary step in vacating the rights-of-way to allow the lot consolidation of the site, the subdivision, and then the eventual land development of the proposed AutoZone.
Okay. Council members, Ms. Daniels, do you have any questions? Mr. Majors?
I know, hold on. Come back to me. I do have a question, but I'm just looking at the.
Okay, Mr. Allen?
So summarizing, this would vacate between McClay and Peffer specifically. There's that little alley, mini alley that I think would also get rid of. Is that part of that?
Yes, that's correct.
And then it doesn't look like, but correct me if I'm wrong, there's no residential homes that are impacted by this, correct? Because there's nothing on Moki specifically. I see there's some homes on Peffer.
Yeah, there are some homes on Peffer, and they would be receiving half of the right-of-way, the width of their property as part of this.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Mattson?
No questions for me, thanks.
Ms. Green?
Not too many. Were there other street vacations required for this project?
Yeah, there were other street vacations that were approved previously by city council. They were largely paper streets or little grocers' alleys that ran behind all of the houses that once used to exist on that block. So little 4 or 5 foot rights of way. They were all paper streets. There are obviously no buildings at which they're servicing anymore on the block, save for one, which was not adjacent to any of the rights of way. Again, those were vacated by city council in the past. So those were the only other vacations associated with this project.
All right, why is this one being brought down separately? Any specific reason?
The applicant didn't apply for these specific street vacations when they originally brought down the first street vacation. And then after reviewing the land development plans, it was brought to their attention that they would need to vacate Mulkey Street as well as that portion of Mini Alley.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Bowers?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I'm
If I
sorry.
may, President Williams, I know at the time of the land development plan, there were some concerns by the city engineer about the condition of the sidewalk on McClay Street, and there was talk of, as a condition for the street vacation, that the owner of that property would enter into some type of agreement or stipulation as far as timing on correction of the deficiencies in that sidewalk.
And is that still your concern, Mr. Martin?
It is, yes.
So we'd like for us to do an amendment to this particular bill, and inclusive of them repairing the sidewalk, or?
I mean, alternatively, we could have something in writing of a plan to address the sidewalk
Okay.
from the property owner. The property owner and the applicant are not the same entity, so.
I don't have a problem with that. So you want him to amend it, Dave?
Is it an amendment or a condition?
It would be a condition, but you would have to amend the
Yeah, you'd have to do an
resolution
amendment, so it's in your
to add the
plans.
condition.
Okay, so it'd be an
So
amendment.
is the
to
attorney
the
for AutoZone here?
For AutoZone, yes, but it's the Buonorati Trust that owns
Is
the
anyone
property.
representing them here?
Mr. Vartan is here in the back.
Okay. So would they be in agreement, Mr.? Would you like to come forward so we can ask them if they're in agreement with that? There's no sense of us doing an amendment if they're not going to be in agreement.
Yeah. Why don't you come up?
Please. Turn.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ralph Vartan, I'm a trustee of the Buonorati Trust. And you don't need to question our willingness to maintain the sidewalk. We can just do that anyway. I believe there's a property maintenance code for the city that requires sidewalks to be updated, so.
There's no problem with doing that. Okay. But we're going to add it as a
Or-
condition amendment. Is that all right?
However you want to handle it.
Okay, that's fine.
Your best judgment's fine with me, but we're
Okay.
believers in good sidewalks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vartan. Okay, we will do an amendment. You want to give him the?
I'll give him the language.
Okay. Okay, and then we'll add Bill 3 to the agenda, for the legislative agenda for a vote. At this time, is there any public comment on the Bill 3?
Hello? Phil Dobson, 819 South Cameron Street. I do own a property that's adjacent to Minnie Alley. It's 622 Pfeffer Street. I would oppose this street vacation because it will limit access to the rear of my property and could in fact have an adverse effect on the property value. So for that reason, I would ask that it not be approved because, again, it will limit access to my property. And the other part of that is, if they divide this alley in half, it won't be passable. And then, of course, the burden of additional taxes will fall on me because now that'll be taxable land. So, thank you.
I don't think there's no passageway at the present time. You cannot get an automobile through. The only thing you can get there is a motorcycle or a bicycle.
Actually, that alley does run right up past there, and you can turn on that
You can
alley
turn, but you
from
can't
me.
even get through it. You can only turn and be there. I mean, your car has to stay in that designated spot because you cannot take a car through there.
There is an alley. My 622 Pfeffer.
But I don't
is-
think I think you're misunderstanding the location of the vacancy that we're going to do, the
It's to
vacating
the
of
rear
the
of my
alley.
property. But my property is on the corner of the alley, and Minnie is perpendicular to it. Let me see what else.
What's your property? Are you the white house?
It's
with the
sort of
shingles?
like purplish-looking building. It's 622. But Mulkey Alley
Right.
runs along the
Exactly.
side of it, and then Minnie is perpendicular to it.
No, I don't think that would have an effect on it, but okay. Thank you, Mr. Dobson. Any additional questions, council members? Any additional public comment? Hearing none.
President Williams, if I may, just for completion of the record, since we do have opposition to this petition, I just want to note for the record that the petition was signed by a majority of owners in interest and in frontage in accordance with the third-class city code.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Someone else? Okay. Okay, hearing no other questions or comments, I'm going to add this to the legislative agenda for a vote tonight with the inclusive of the conditional amendment. At this time, we're meeting for the public hearing for the 3 orders of business is now officially ended.